On the subject of abortion, I think in 1973, when the abortion law was passed, I think there were two things that transpired. One was the kind of aura that was bred during the 60s and the freedom movements, the liberation movements that transpired during that time. And I think that to some extent that aura kind of traveled over into 1970s, 1973, and the idea that the woman had a right to choose what to do with her body was another point in the liberation of women. So those were very strong standards that were dealt with during that era. And so you could consider that the era between the 1960s and 1970s was very much similar in that there were still some birth events in terms of newness, change, growth that were transpiring, and liberation was a major part of that change and growth process. And the second thing that I think transpired, considering the abortion law, Roe v. Wade, I think that at the time that the Supreme Court received the case, what was possible, what was made possible, was made possible because justices were not looking into the underlying statutes, the underlying substance of the bill itself, and missed the point that was made in 1922-23 when justices rescinded the 1973 law. And that point was that the Constitution does not state that a woman has a right to have an abortion. What the Constitution does state is that every American has a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And let's just look at liberty for a moment. Inside of liberty, we have first the knowledge that those rights, including liberty, are unalienable, meaning that we cannot be separated from those rights. We cannot be separated from our freedom to choose what we want to do. If I choose to ride a bicycle from here to Washington, D.C., it is my right to choose. If I should choose to take a flight and travel to Europe, I have a right to choose. So there's one other thing, and I really want to mention this, and that is men and women have a right and are free to choose whether they want to or do not want to have sex with each other. And so long as there is a consent between two people, then conducting the act or sexual act is lawful, and it is a right that is had by each individual. Now, considering that we are people, we are Americans who are born into an inherent right, then we have to accept that our freedom is a right that we have to exercise. What happens when the law or the Supreme Court says that there's no right given to a woman to have an abortion? The Supreme Court cannot be wrong at that. It's not contained in the Constitution, and therefore the Supreme Court had to correct itself. And because of that correction, we have to accept that, okay, the Supreme Court, or rather the U.S. Constitution, does not give the right to an abortion. That's acceptable. However, the U.S. Constitution does state that every American has a right to exercise their freedom. So without a law emanating from the highest level of our nation, that being the federal level and the Supreme Court, there is no law that says a woman cannot have an abortion. That's acceptable. What happens to intercede and to intercept the fact that a woman has a right to choose her own path and to exercise her freedom is where the state has entered in and the state has imposed bans on abortion. Well, what that does, what the state does, in fact, is affect the rights to exercising one's freedom to choose. That's a violation of an American's unalienable right to freedom. Okay, so what we have to realize now is that the state is making the very same mistake that was made in 1973 when there was an oversight on the part of whether the Constitution contains any language that gives a right to abortion. It did not. That was an oversight in 1973. Corrected. Very good. It was corrected. And now the states have to reckon with the fact that, or rather argue, consider and review whether or not a ban on abortion is saying you have no freedom to choose to have an abortion. And I think that's where we're at right now. The states appear at this point to be in violation of every single woman within the state who might choose to have an abortion. I think at this point, what may be necessary from this state in our society, in our states, given the fact that every state legislature has the power and the authority to legislate, to establish law, what may be necessary, particularly when we're dealing with a matter as impactful as abortion, I think what should happen is that when such bill comes forth, that it should first be taken to the U.S. Congress to be discussed, to be perused, and to absolutely unfold every possibility, to look into deeper into the details to determine whether it is right based on constitutional law to impose a ban on abortion. I think what we have to reckon with now is that the states are in violation, plain and simple, violation of a woman's rights. And it is a matter at issue at this point. And I think that sometimes we get bogged down. We're moving so fast, things are happening, and the friction between partisanship and so forth allows certain wrong things to happen. And I think that's what's happened in this situation. The bottom line is that a woman has a right to exercise her freedom. And under such circumstance, that a doctor who is also exercising his freedom chooses to perform an abortion, that is his right to do so. If a woman who is exercising her freedom chooses to have an abortion performed, it is her right to exercise her freedom to do so. In each instance, the impact, the consequence of either performing an abortion or choosing to have an abortion performed does not fall on the hands of every American. It is an absolute individual decision and choice, and everything that may come out of that, all the fallout and whatever, it's the responsibility of that person. And there are so many more matters at issue involved in this subject. But to sum it up, when the states take their hand out of making a decision about a woman's right concerning her reproductive self, concerning her reproductive ability, when the state removes its decision and the laws that have banned that right, then what we realize is that the state, neither the state nor the federal level, are making any choice about whether a woman should or should not have an abortion. And what it comes down to is that the state, while it has no laws imposed against a woman nor for a woman to have an abortion, it is neither obligated to put forth any funding towards whether a woman should or should not have an abortion. If an abortion is not permitted, if it's not included in the in the benefits, for instance, that may be had by a person who uses Medicaid in any state, if it is not included in those benefits, then the state does not fund abortion. And by no other means may the state fund abortion clinics or any crisis centers or any such thing as that. And neither will the federal level, given the fact that the law, the Roe v. Wade law is now rescinded, neither the federal level may fund any activities involving abortion. Now, these are strictly my opinions. I'm not laying down a law. This is where I kind of gravitate where abortion is concerned. But the bottom line is, while every American has a right to exercise their freedom, there can be and there should be no law that says or that attempts to separate a woman from her right to choose what to do with her body. Simply put, end of discussion.